Top 10 Chilling Motives of Female Serial Killers. Welcome to Creepshow, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. In today's chilling episode, we dive deep into the twisted minds of some of history's most terrifying female serial killers. Now, while popular media may paint them as scorned lovers or vengeful victims, the true motives behind their horrifying acts are far more disturbing than we dare imagine. From dark rituals to twisted experiments, these women crossed lines no one could ever have seen coming. So, lock your doors, turn down the lights, and prepare yourself. We're about to explore the darkest corners of the human mind. Here are the top 10 chilling motives of female serial killers. Number 10. Clementine Barnabet. The motive? Testing her voodoo superpowers. In the early 1910s, Louisiana was gripped by terror. A series of brutal axe murders had entire communities in fear, whole families slaughtered as they slept. The crime scenes? Unimaginable. Blood everywhere. But no one could have expected that behind these heinous acts was a young woman, Clementine Barnabet. Only 19 years old, Clementine confessed to a shocking number of killings. She claimed that she held a voodoo charm, one that gave her power and protection from ever being caught by the police. Her most chilling confession? She admitted to killing the children of the families she attacked, believing it would save them from a life of orphanhood. But her stories changed, again and again. The authorities struggled to untangle the truth from her web of lies. What they did know: Clementine had a hand in at least 35 murders. She was sentenced to life in prison, but the story doesn't end there. After serving just 10 years, she was released on good behavior, following a mysterious medical procedure that supposedly restored her to normalcy. Did the voodoo powers she believed in protect her in the end, or was she just another young soul, lost to the darkness? Number 9. Linda Hazzard. The motive: starving her patients for their own good. Linda Hazzard wasn't your typical doctor. In fact, she wasn't really a doctor at all. In the early 1900s, she ran a sanitarium in Washington, offering a treatment she believed could cure any illness: extreme fasting. Her methods were so severe they bordered on torture. Without any formal medical training, she somehow managed to get licensed as a fasting specialist. Her theory? That food itself, specifically too much food, was the root of all disease. Patients at her sanitarium were subjected to a strict regimen: tiny portions of vegetable broth, daily enemas, and intense, almost violent massages. One patient, Claire Williamson, was given just 2 cups of tomato broth each day and was forced to endure hours-long enemas in a bathtub. By the time Claire died, she weighed less than 70 pounds. Linda Hazzard was charged with first-degree murder for essentially starving Claire to death, but even with at least 15 patients dead under her care, Hazzard refused to take any responsibility. She firmly believed that fasting couldn't possibly be the cause of death, claiming instead that if a patient died, it was because they were already doomed. Hazzard was sentenced to hard labor at the Walla Walla Penitentiary. Her medical license revoked. Yet shockingly, she served only 2 years before she was released. She lived out the rest of her days still clinging to the same deadly belief that starvation could heal, even as it left a trail of bodies behind. The hunger for control is a dangerous thing. Number 8. Martha Ann Johnson. The motive? Punishing her husband by killing their children. Between 1977 and 1982, Martha Ann Johnson committed a series of unspeakable crimes, smothering 3 of her own children, each time as a twisted form of revenge against her husband. Whenever they fought and he walked out, one of their children wouldn't survive the night. In September of 1977, at just 21 years old, Martha was already on her 3rd marriage. She lived with her husband and her children from previous marriages. After a heated argument led to her husband storming out, Martha rushed her 2-year-old to the hospital. But it was too late. The child was pronounced dead, and the doctors chalked it up to sudden infant death syndrome. Soon after, she and her husband reconciled and even had 2 more children. But the pattern repeated itself. In 1980, after another fight, their 3-month-old died, again attributed to sudden infant death. It didn't stop there. After yet another dispute, their young son died under eerily similar circumstances, But it was the death of Martha's eldest daughter, just a year later, that finally raised suspicions. The girl had been asphyxiated, though no clear cause could be determined. It wasn't until 1989, after a fourth marriage, that the truth finally emerged. Martha confessed to smothering 2 of her children by using her own 250-pound body to crush them as they slept. Her reason? She wanted to punish her husband, to make him come back to her. Chillingly, she denied killing the other 2 children, even though the pattern was clear. Martha Ann Johnson is now serving a life sentence at Pulaski State Prison, where the only thing left to smother is the weight of her own guilt. For some, the desire for control knows no bounds, even at the cost of innocent lives. Number 7. Tilly Kimac. The motive. Boosting her psychic reputation with murder. Tilly Kimac had a chilling reputation in her Chicago neighborhood. She claimed to have dreams that foretold death, whether it was a neighbor, a stray dog, or even her own husband. But these weren't just innocent premonitions. They were plans. The deaths she predicted weren't accidents or fate. They were carefully orchestrated murders. In 1914, Tilly confided to friends that she had dreamed her husband was sick and wouldn't live more than a few weeks, and like clockwork, he died just as she had predicted. But Tilly didn't waste time mourning. Within a month, she had remarried, and soon afterward, her visions returned. Her new husband was destined to die. Sure enough, he was gone within 3 months. The pattern continued. After her second husband died, Tilly quickly found another suitor. This time, the man died soon after eating candy she had given him. Not long after that, she wed again. She even told neighbors not to expect her third husband to last long. And if that wasn't eerie enough, she kept a coffin on standby. In April 1921, her prediction for husband number 3 came true. He was dead. Tilly wasted no time and quickly married for a 4th time. But this time, her new husband was more cautious. When he fell ill, he consulted a doctor, and tests confirmed the unthinkable. He was being poisoned with arsenic. Tilly was arrested, and the investigation revealed a trail of bodies behind her. Every one of her deceased husbands, and even a few other victims, had lethal amounts of arsenic in their systems. She had used a mix of soot and arsenic, a rat poison, to commit her crimes. At her trial, Kimac chillingly confessed to killing 20 people, including several animals, just to keep up her grim predictions. She was convicted of 1 murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tilly Kimac's reign of terror ended in 1936, when she died at age 60 in the Illinois State Penitentiary. For Tilly, murder wasn't just a means to an end. It was her twisted way of playing fortune teller. Number 6. Jane Toppan. The motive? A dark and disturbing quest for the sexual thrill of murder. Jane Toppan, known to many as Jolly Jane, was not the nurturing caregiver her patients thought she was. Despite her outgoing and friendly demeanor, Toppen harbored a chilling secret. As a nurse, she didn't aspire to heal the sick. She longed to kill as many helpless people as possible, more than anyone before her. Her journey into the depths of darkness began early in her nursing career. Though her fellow students at the Massachusetts hospital where she trained saw her as charming and upbeat, administrators noticed her peculiar obsession with autopsies. What they didn't realize was that Jane was experimenting with deadly drugs on her elderly patients behind the scenes. After completing her studies, Jane's reckless handling of opiates led to her being dismissed from her first hospital position. Still, doctors praised her talents and recommended her as a private nurse to wealthy clients. That's when the real horror began. One by one, Jane Toppan began killing the people under her care. She would administer drugs, often a cocktail of morphine and atropine, and then stay by their side as they slipped in and out of consciousness. But this wasn't just about death for Jane. As her patients lay dying, she would hold them close and fondle them, deriving a twisted pleasure from their final moments. She later confessed that she found sexual excitement in bringing her victims near death, reviving them only to watch them die again. By the time she was caught in 1901, Jane had admitted to killing at least 31 people, though authorities suspect the actual number may have been closer to 100. Her trial was swift. After an 8-hour proceeding and a mere 27-minute jury deliberation, Jane Toppan was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Instead of facing a death sentence, she was confined to a state hospital where she spent the rest of her life. She died in 1938, but her legacy lives on as one of the most disturbing female serial killers in history. In Jane's case, death wasn't just the end. It was her twisted source of pleasure. Number 5. Gwendelyn Graham and Katherine Wood. The motive: to spell out murder. Gwendelyn Graham and Katherine Wood, often dubbed the Lethal Lovers, formed a deadly partnership while working as nurses' aides at a nursing home in Grand Rapids, Michigan in the mid-1980s. Their sinister scheme unfolded in 1987, when Graham allegedly began relieving tension by smothering an elderly patient to death. But this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a deadly game. Over the next 2 months, Graham and Wood continued their murderous spree, smothering 4 more patients in similar fashion. The elderly victims, frail and already in poor health, didn't raise any red flags at the time, and their deaths were dismissed as natural. But there was something even more disturbing beneath the surface. Wood later claimed that they had been choosing their victims based on their initials, aiming to spell out the word murder. However, as relationships often do, the couple's deadly bond unraveled. When the 2 women parted ways, Wood couldn't keep the secret any longer. She confessed the details of their crimes to authorities, cutting a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Graham. In court, Wood portrayed Graham as the mastermind, the one who had physically committed the murders, while Wood, she claimed, was merely an accessory. Graham was convicted of 5 counts of murder and received 5 life sentences. Wood, however, was given a lesser sentence of 40 years after pleading guilty to second-degree murder. But the story doesn't end there. Some have speculated that Wood was far more involved than she let on. They believe that Wood may have orchestrated the killings after discovering that Graham was involved with another woman, using the murders to manipulate Graham into staying with her. In this version of events, Wood played the prosecutor and jury just as she played Graham, pleading guilty not out of remorse, but to exact revenge on her former lover. In their deadly game of love and murder, nothing was as it seemed. Number 4. Sarah Whiteling. The motive: sending her children to heaven. In 1888, Sarah Whiteling's household became a series of tragedies, as her family members died one after another. Her husband John was the first to succumb, with doctors attributing his death to inflammation of the bowels. Just 1 month later, her young daughter Bertha also passed away. This time, the doctors suspected gastric fever. Then, within 2 months, her 2-year-old son William died from what doctors believed was an obstruction of the bowels. But these deaths were no tragic coincidence. Dr. George Smith, who had overseen the family's cases, became suspicious and alerted the coroner. The bodies were exhumed, and the truth was revealed. All 3 had been poisoned with arsenic. When questioned, Sarah confessed. She claimed that her husband had poisoned himself due to depression and his inability to provide for their family. As for her children, her reasoning was far more disturbing. Sarah admitted to poisoning her daughter because she feared little Bertha, whom she affectionately called Birdie, would grow up to be sinful and wicked. Her son, William, she called him a burden, and she wanted to get him out of the way because she couldn't afford to care for him. Despite her actions, Sarah was deeply religious and confessed she had thought about ending her own life, but didn't want to sin. She believed her children were angels in heaven and that one day she would reunite with them. However, she didn't expect to see her husband there, stating that since he had committed suicide, he would be barred from heaven. But under further questioning, Sarah eventually admitted the full truth. She had killed John as well. "The devil possessed me," she said, "and told me to go home and give my husband some poison, and I did." In 1889, Sarah Whiteling was charged with 3 counts of murder. Her case made history. She became the first woman to be hanged in Philadelphia. For Sarah, death was a twisted escape, one she believed led straight to heaven, for some at least. Number 3. Diane Odell. The motive? To rid herself of the bastard children. Diane Odell's story is one of heartbreaking neglect and disturbing secrecy. Over the course of her life, she gave birth to 12 children, but not all of them survived. In fact, 4 of her babies died under suspicious circumstances, and the truth of what happened would not be fully uncovered for decades. In 1981, Odell left her husband and their 3 children behind. Over the next 4 years, she secretly gave birth to 3 more babies. How did no one notice? Odell claimed that due to her heavy-set figure, she was able to hide her pregnancies from everyone around her. In 1985, she entered a new relationship with Robert Sauerstein, who became her common-law husband. The couple went on to have 5 more children, but unbeknownst to Sauerstein, Odell was harboring a horrific secret. During their frequent moves from state to state, she carried the corpses of 3 newborns with her, babies she had given birth to in secret. The gruesome truth began to unravel in 1989 when the body of an infant was discovered inside a suitcase in a car about to be crushed for scrap. The car was traced back to Odell. She admitted that the baby had been born in 1972 when she was just a teenager, and that it had been stillborn due to abuse from her late father. No charges were filed at the time, and the 3 other dead babies remained hidden. It wasn't until 2003, when the remains of the 3 infants were found in an abandoned storage unit in Arizona, that the full scale of Odell's crimes came to light. Investigators determined that she had killed the babies because they were illegitimate. They were unwanted, and in Odell's mind, they were bastard children who had no place in her life. Odell was finally brought to justice and is now serving a life sentence for the deaths of her children. For Diane Odell, motherhood became a dark secret she could no longer escape, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. Number 2, Wetta Hoy. The motive? A desperate need for peace and quiet. In a case that shook the medical world and shattered the belief that sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, ran in families, Wetta Hoy was revealed to be far more than a grieving mother. For over 2 decades, her story had been one of unimaginable loss, as 5 of her children, Eric, Julie, James, Molly, and Noah, had all tragically died before their time. Medical experts once pointed to her family's case as proof that SIDS could be hereditary. But in 1994, the harrowing truth came to light. Wetta Hoy had killed her children one by one. During her confession, Hoy admitted that she had smothered each of her babies simply to stop their crying. She said, "I could not stand the crying. It was the thing that caused me to kill them all because I didn't know what to do for them." Her methods were disturbingly cold. 3 of her children were smothered with pillows, one with a bath towel, and the other by pressing the baby into her shoulder until it could no longer breathe. For Wetta, the sound of her children's cries drove her to an unspeakable breaking point, a place where the only solution in her mind was silence. Hoy was convicted of the murders in 1994 and sentenced to 15 years for each child's death. However, her story came to a close in 1998, when she died in prison at the age of 52. Despite the horrific nature of her crimes, Hoy was formally exonerated because she passed away before her appeal could be processed. For Wetta Hoy, motherhood became a nightmare of sound, one she silenced in the most unforgivable way. Number 1, Susan Monica. The motive? Restitution for the dodo birds. Susan Monica was no ordinary farmer. Her Oregon pig farm, tucked away from prying eyes, became the setting for unspeakable horrors. In 2012, Monica shot a handyman she had hired and disposed of his body in a truly grisly way. She fed him to her pigs. When questioned by police, Monica initially claimed that the man had been suicidal, saying he shot himself in the head 5 times. She later changed her story, saying she had shot him in self-defense and that her pigs had dragged the body away to feast on it. According to Monica, the pigs picked his bones clean over the course of 2 weeks, leaving her to bury what little remained. But the nightmare didn't stop there. 1 year later, a second handyman suffered the same fate. This time, Monica claimed it was a mercy killing. She said the pigs had attacked the man, and she shot him to put him out of his misery. She didn't report either death, supposedly out of fear that authorities would euthanize her pigs. During her interrogation, Monica revealed a chilling view of the world. She stated, "I do not value human life very much. My feeling is the only thing wrong with the planet is there's people on it. If not for us, all the other animals, even dodo birds, would be here." This callous disregard for human life spoke volumes about her motives. To her, eliminating people was somehow a twisted form of restitution for the extinction of creatures like the dodo bird. In the end, Monica was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and her pigs, unknowing accomplices to these gruesome crimes, were euthanized. For Susan Monica, her disdain for humanity led her to act out her own brutal brand of justice, where life held no value, and her pigs became a tool of her murderous plans. These killers remind us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't hide in the shadows. They walk among us, ordinary on the outside, but driven by sinister desires. Which of these chilling motives left you speechless? Let us know in the comments below. And if today's descent into the macabre left you wanting more, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Stay tuned to Creepshow, where the horror never sleeps.